Hello, I'm Sleepy. What's your name? No, actually, my name's Davina. I'm broadcasting live from Asia. I'm an Australian interested in American politics. I've been broadcasting on the topic of the resurgence of fascism now for 2 years, and I'm tired. But look, things are looking up, although at the same time, we might also be in very dangerous territory over the next 18 days. The Pentagon was withdrawing a US warship, the Nimitz, from the Middle East, but that decision has now been reversed, presumably at Trump's request, making it look all the more likely Trump will instigate war with Iran purely as a clutching at straws effort to stay in power, not just because he's particularly attached to being the president. God knows he's terrible at it, but because he's like a drug addict in relation to needing immunity from criminal liability. And that immunity, to a degree, is conferred by complex interaction between a 1974 legal memo from the Office of Legal Counsel and the opinions of people in positions like the special prosecutor, Robert Mueller, who decided, can't prosecute Trump, have to protect him, can't even properly explain to the public that he has likely committed acts of obstruction, which are a process crime. Obstructing justice prevents people from being accountable for their crimes and is therefore a crime in and of itself. So Tip points out the 6th of January will be epic. I recognize your little troll face. It's quite a nice drawing. But yes, the reason why some people think the 6th of January will be epic is because they have a very strong attachment to a fabricated reality, which is injected straight into their veins via any number of very powerful propaganda networks, whether it be Breitbart, Fox News, Ben Shapiro's, whatever it is he does, or any other number of conservative radio deceivers like Rush Limbaugh. There's a whole lot of different ways to get deluded. You're a troll because your positions aren't based in reality and you insist on bringing your fabrications over here. So anybody who thinks the 6th of January will be epic is because they're attached to the idea of violent overthrow of the American government, or failing that, seditious overthrow of the American government, elected American government. It's going to be a long debate. It's going to be a long day and night. I'm not going to watch it, but kudos to anybody who does. I'm really more excited about January the 5th, which is the opportunity for conscientious Americans to kick 2 Republican senators out of office. David Perdue is formally not a senator at the moment, and Kelly Loeffler is a senator, but she's not that popular. And according to some surveys, the people most likely to sit out of the forthcoming election tomorrow. Is it tomorrow for you? I guess it'll be tomorrow for you. No, it'll be the day after tomorrow for you, won't it? Because it's kind of just started Tuesday for me, but it'll be a little while before it's Tuesday, the 5th of January for you. Historic opportunity to have 2 Democratic senators, which will marginalize Mitch McConnell, the agent of obstructing pro-social bills for the American people, bills that have been passed by half a branch, a half branch of the legislative branch of government, which is one of the 3 branches, and it's bifurcated into 2, the House and the Senate. And the House keeps passing bills. 400 bills have passed. They've died or been stultified on Mitch McConnell's desk, which has had some pretty serious consequences for the American people. And I'm here to rehabilitate language around that so that people don't just say, oh, so many people have fallen into poverty. Mitch McConnell and his coterie of crooks have pushed Americans into poverty by virtue of denying them relief funds when national disaster strikes, including the national disaster of having a crooked president who's firmly opposed to treating a pandemic as the very real crisis it is, because he wanted to paint himself as the purported savior by virtue of the alternate reality he crafted for believers and his supporters, in which the pandemic wasn't a problem. And he hoped to squeeze some electoral benefit out of that by virtue of encouraging all his supporters to vote in person on November the 3rd, and not to indulge in safe behaviours like voting by mail and avoiding risk of disease transmission. So he ensured his supporters would be suspicious of mail-in voting, which he derided as potentially a weaker, less safe system, and encouraged his voters to vote in person on the day, and encouraged his state Republican legislative friends to preclude the opportunity for electoral counters, vote counters in swing states to begin counting those early mail-in ballots. And he did that in order to push home a false perception to America on the day of the election that Trump had decisively won that election, and that any attempts to say otherwise were fake news, election stealing events. So if people want to argue to me that Trump's legitimately delusional, they can say it, but they're wasting their breath, because Trump has taken very significant steps to ensure that he was able to fraudulently deprive the American people of a free and fair election. And the fact that he didn't succeed is testament not only to those who organized, who contacted voters, who kept making the case over and over again for Joe Biden's presidency and its desirability over a crooked, corrupt, damaging Trump presidency, but also to the fact that so many people's lives have been damaged, because fascism surges when there's emotional turmoil. People are worried that the gender dynamic guarantees of the world are changing, that men were men and women were women, but now women might be hostile if they perceive their power as being taken from them or denied to them. And that can be upsetting for some men to be challenged in that way, to be accused of sexism. And some people are on the conservative right, particularly the conservative religious right, have problems with marriage equality, problems with appropriate access to bathrooms for people who exist in novel ways on the gender or sex spectrum. McConnell won't be the speaker with a vice president, Kamala Harris, indeed. Minority rule is very problematic, but America has some significant incipient steps towards majority rule. Biden was elected by a majority popular vote, and with any luck, soon the Senate will be actually dominated by a party that has the support of a majority of Americans. So we often characterize America as being conservative, but that's just because America's archaic electoral college system favors conservative-minded Americans, disheartening the rest of America to a degree so that they begin to believe that more progressive policies are pipe dreams and can never be achieved. Pumpkin, Hunter Biden, unlike Ivanka Trump and her husband, he's not paid a salary by the American taxpayer. What do you think Ivanka Trump is paid to do? What do you think Jared Kushner is paid to do? Because mostly it's F up your life and the life of everybody else in America. Whilst Ivanka Trump simultaneously is granted patents by the Chinese government. Trump lied about the virus and refused to entertain intelligence from the billion-dollar intelligence agencies provided by American taxpayers, funded by American taxpayers, in order to provide high-quality information to the American president. Trump ignored that intelligence because he was trying to pursue a special deal with China, a trade deal that he could then wave, like all of them wave pieces of paper, like Kayleigh McEnany waves paper and says, look at this stack of blank paper evidence of something or other. Trump wanted to waive a trade deal in January to say, look at my amazing deal with the Chinese. Don't listen to any people who say there's a manufacturing recession of 2019 that's spreading to adjacent industries in the transport and storage fields. Don't listen to that. Look at my trade deal with China. So he was prepared to say anything to ingratiate himself to President Xi, the leader of the Chinese Communist Party and the ruler of the Chinese government, which I will agree with you is also a totalitarian, authoritarian style government in which millions of Uyghur Muslims are held in concentration camps. And there's evidence from witnesses, from satellite photos to suggest those detained migrants are not only being separated from their family and abused, but also forced to work in on-site detention center factories that produce school uniforms and clothes and other manufactured goods. So I'm sorry I left that comment up for so long. Thanks for the compliment, T-Dog. I did read Lynn Wood's latest rant. He made some pretty extreme, unhinged accusations against Chief Justice John Roberts and said he was part of a global conspiracy of Hollywood actors and people in elite positions who were trafficking in children. The thing is, people do get trafficked, women and children predominantly, but he was being very specific to say there's an actor who's conveniently dead called Isaac Kebby, some name that I've never heard of before, but it's not whether or not I've heard of it that's important. The important thing, he said, that the FBI, the CIA, multiple intelligence agencies are in cahoots with sex trafficking rings around the world, exploitation rings of relating to child trafficking and child prostitution. Not prostitution, child trafficking rings. And what else did he say? That Chief Justice John Roberts was involved and that people were being blackmailed with a gun and then forced to do awful things that I won't reiterate here, but the disturbed thrust of that argument was QAnon, basically, that only Trump is opposed to all of these terrible things, but that the head of the Supreme Court is part of those things and should be arrested and tried, as should anybody who's ever been on a Jeffrey Epstein plane. Jeffrey Epstein had a private jet and he flew a bunch of celebrities around, but that doesn't in and of itself convict them of Jeffrey Epstein's racket of prostituting young girls. Yes, Lynn Wood claimed to have videotapes, but he is probably on drugs, and I would not grant his Twitter testimony a bunch of credence. Yes, the Biden distractions are very much disinformation pushed by Russia. I mean, Rudy Giuliani traveled to Ukraine and interacted with Russian spies to help him create a fictional narrative in which you take some things that are true or some photos you've stolen from Hunter Biden and you mix it up and pretend it's more significant than it is. You inflate it to the power of 10 and say, world, why don't you care about this man who's not part of the American government, not in a taxpayer-funded role like the current president's children, Ivanka Trump and her husband. And yeah, so you can keep saying it, but you're kind of wasting your breath here. And the moderators will probably mute you, not because we're set against you exercising your First Amendment rights, but because we're not under any obligation to give a platform to your nonsense and to the fact that you are too gullible to be able to resist the spread of disinformation and psychological warfare products. Yes, Tony is a grifter, and so are you, but less a productive grifter. Limbo Bus Van points out that China has hundreds of new facilities and they're paying their enslaved working population $1.35 a month. We do. We want real conversation, and we just don't want to talk to people who traffic in delusions. So Hunter Biden could be under federal investigation because the man corruptly in charge of the presidency and the man corruptly in charge of the Attorney General's office, they're corrupt and they investigate people corruptly. They've resurrected federal executions and tried to bring forward executing people because that's part of fascism. So we know that the next iteration of fascism at the moment is massively ramping up accusations of communism. So all the crazy people that go into shopping centers and start ranting that they're never going to wear masks because this is America and it's not communist China and it's not Iran. They're repeating what they've been brainwashed into caring about predominantly. They've been brainwashed into overlooking the hospitals filling up, the premature deaths of hospital workers, healthcare workers, people over 65. They're overlooking the fact that one in every 900 Americans has died as a result of complications arising from COVID, which is a disease that doesn't just attack your bodily organs, but prompts your body's own immune systems to attack your organs and weaken blood vessels in your brain and in your heart. Yep, I can believe that they're calling everybody a Communist Party sympathizer because, hell, that was Hitler's shtick as well, to inflame the public against the communist threat. And look, Hitler wasn't making it up. Communists are a threat in that Russian communism wasn't great. Everywhere that's tried communism has proven that it's a system of government that inherently lends itself towards authoritarianism and therefore oppression, mass murder, deprivation, cruelty and harm, and mass brainwashing. But it's a powerful tool in the wrong hands to point out the ills of communism. In the corrupt hands of some, they will use fears of communism to drive the people into an illogical frenzy that will overlook the corruption of the fascist leader. Hello, Alan. Wearing a mask is not a big thing to do, it's true. Someone says I look like Mafia. Is that like a mummy mafia? Cute. All right, shall we listen to a tiny bit of the Trump tapes? Because it's pretty historic that Trump whines for an hour on the phone like a drug addict who just wants that 11,000 votes. I haven't listened to the tape itself, but I've read the entire transcript of the call. Not a huge feat in itself. It's pretty easy to read quickly. The content is not that dense or challenging. It's just a bunch of Trump whining in a way that proves to me, at least, he doesn't actually believe he won the election. He just likes to assert it in the way that mobsters like to assert things to make them happen. Yeah, I'm the toughest, I'm the greatest, and you will all obey me. That kind of bravado that's a calculated ploy to pressure people into capitulation. So cool photos, happy to do that. Excellent. All right. And yes, of course, it's a lucrative grift, but it's also, he really wants it to happen. He really wants to be able to overturn that election. All right. Oh, no volume. Thanks.
We won very substantially, Georgia. Uh, you even see it by rally size, frankly. We'd be getting 25, 30,000 people a rally, and the competition would get less than 100 people, and it never made sense. But we have a number of things. We have at least two or three, anywhere from 250 to 300,000 ballots were dropped mysteriously into the rolls. Much of that had to do with Fulton County, which hasn't been checked. We think that if you check the signatures, a real check of the signatures going back in Fulton County, you'll find at least a couple of 100,000 of forged signatures of people with who have been forged, and we are quite sure that's going to happen. Another tremendous number. We're going to have an accurate number over the next 2 days with certified accountants, but an accurate number will be given, but it's in the 50s of thousands, and that's people that went to vote and they were told they can't vote because they've already been voted for. And it's a very sad thing. They walked out complaining, but the number is large. We'll have it for you, but it's much more than the number of 11,779. That's the current margin is only 11,779. Brad, I think you agree with that, right? That's something I think at least that's a number that everyone agrees on. But that's the difference in the votes. But we've had hundreds of thousands of ballots that we're able to actually. We'll get you a pretty accurate number. You don't need much of a number because the number that, in theory, I lost by the margin would be 11,779. But you also have substantial numbers of people, thousands and thousands, who went to the voting place on November 3rd. Were told they couldn't vote. We're told they couldn't vote because a ballot had been put in on their name, and that's very, 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 very sad. We had, I believe it's about 4,502 voters who voted, but who weren't on the voter registration list. So it's 4,502 who voted, but they were not on the voter registration roll, which they had to be. You had 18,325 vacant address voters. The address was vacant.
Yeah. All right. The dude's a little crackerjack. Blah, 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 blah. Oh, sweetie, we understand you're angry, but it's always painful when reality in your head doesn't match the reality that's happening. So Trump's call, if you were listening along, Morgan0282, thanks for calling me a piece of shit. I'm sure you're a very high quality person with strong, profound ethics and a commitment to democracy and the government of the people, for the people, and by the people, etc. The reason why the Trump lawyers and the Trump team have lost 60 cases is because the only evidence of fraud that's emerged so far is Trump himself on a telephone call telling the Georgian Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, that he just needs 11,780 votes to overcome the 11,779 vote lead by Joe Biden currently, and certified and soon to be formalized by Mike Pence, etc. So even rabid fascists like Republican Senator Tom Cotton have today said they reject the idea of Republicans opposing the Electoral College count that's to transpire on the 6th of January, which means at this point they're concerned about legal exposure for themselves and the potential public pushback to a nakedly corrupt president. Obviously, when you have fascism, you don't just have a fascist leader, you have a strong subset of the population that are brainwashed to ignore criminality and corruption and will always insist, regardless of what happens, that their alternate version of reality, their alternate facts, has merit. You would like some certified accountants? That's nice. Yes, rally size in a pandemic is evidence that you've tricked your followers into disbelieving in the pandemic and therefore risking their lives and the lives of others in their communities and in their nation to attend potential super spreader events, to expend their risk budget on a rally when they don't have to go to rallies. Rallies don't correlate with voting turnout. They just correlate with entertainment. So Bernie Sanders had big rallies, didn't translate into a strong vote for Bernie Sanders in the primary. In fact, his primary vote in 2020 was even smaller than his share of the primary vote in 2016. Yes, Devin Nunes and Jim Jordan are getting the Presidential Medal of Honor, which really degrades it. But look, a lot of things have been really degraded under Trump. Children have been forcibly separated from their parents, and not all of them have yet been reunited. And that included babies, infants, young children, as well as teenagers. And then housed at great expense to the American taxpayer in unhygienic and unsafe conditions. Yes, Biden had safe rallies and Trump committed negligent homicide over and over again. Very true. Now, shall I skip forward a bit with Trump? Let's see if there's anything. I just want to hear him beg a little bit more.
We can at least have a discussion to look at some of these allegations to find a path forward that's less litigious.
Well, I've listened to what the president has just said. President Trump, we've had several lawsuits, and we've had to respond in court to the lawsuits and the contentions. We don't agree that you have one. I didn't agree about the 200,000 number that you'd mentioned, and I could go through that point by point. What we had done is we gave our state senate about 1.5 hours of our time going through the election issue by issue, and then on the state house, the government affairs committee, we gave them about 2.5 hours of our time, going back point by point on all the issues of contention. And then just a few days ago, we met with our U.S. congressman, Republican congressman, and we gave them about 2 hours of our time talking about this past election. Going back.
So Molly was earlier saying that she admired perhaps the backbone of Republican officials in standing up to Trump, which is admirable, but I'm also able to compartmentalize it and point out that these are also Republicans who keep purging Black voters from the roll, the voting rolls. So whilst they might not support open, naked criminality, they have still operated in a way that is inherently, fundamentally antithetical to the concept of democracy and equality of access to the vote, free and fair access to the vote. They have tried to find ways still of disenfranchising Black Americans. So I don't love them, I don't fully embrace them, but I am glad and I cherish the fact that they stood up to Trump and that they recorded themselves doing so in a way that really drops Trump right in it with regards to his federal and state crimes that apparently he broke in that phone call, because many people, Trump, have been saying that it's a crime to try to intimidate and flatter and manipulate people into breaking the law for you and sharing voter data with you and your team that's supposed to be not legally available to you, as well as repeatedly reiterating, I just need 11,000 votes. I just have to find 11,000 votes because I'm convinced I won. I've got a feeling about it. I mean, I put great faith in rally attendance, and surely that counts as a vote. Every person, if we just counted people at rallies, then obviously I decisively won the election. My rallies were bigger than Joe Biden's. All right. Here is John Ossoff and Reverend Raphael Warnock. They're at Savannah last night and Augusta this morning, leaving it all on the field, which is a great spirit. Yes, it does increase the chances of a win for Democrats in Georgia. So, and Trump was critical in the release of the transcript and audio of the call because he tweeted disparagingly about Georgian Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger. And those were the conditions under which Raffensperger had apparently previously determined on releasing the audio call. If Trump was trying to personally attack him, he would seek to clear his name by releasing the audio. I'm so bog-tired right now. Hi, honey, you going to bed? All right, well, I think I will too. First, I'll just scroll tiny through here. So let us not get complacent, or even get our hopes too stuck to the sticking place. But of those who are not voting in the US Senate runoffs, a disproportionate number are purportedly conservative. Of those who identify as very conservative, 55% say they are not voting in the runoff elections because the voting process, according to them, the voting process is rigged. This compares to 0% of liberals and very liberals. Although with liberals, you have to deal with sometimes they pay too much attention to polls and statistics, and they say, oh, well, the stats are good, therefore I as an individual need not exert myself to go and vote. Democrats have been shown to pay more attention to statistics, political statistics, than Republicans. Some say Trump released the call because his voice is clearer than the Georgian Attorney General. Was the Georgian Attorney General on the call? Brad Raffensperger was the Georgian Secretary of State. Is Ryan Germany the Attorney General? No, I believe Brad Raffensperger's office released the call. Bless your heart. Going to take a photo. Well, I read a lot of smart people's insights on Twitter. Twitter is really, when used for input, is a remarkable place to see the best and brightest thoughts of people with substantial background knowledge. Thank you. I endeavor to be sharp. Awesome. I'm also going to thank Molly, who points out that if you're devoted to promoting my presence on the interwebs, you can help encourage me for $2 a month. I'm not desperate for money, but I count the people who support me and boast about it and take encouragement from it. So if you want to contribute to my encouragement fund, you can do so. I have a Patreon account and I very much appreciate my Patreons, and I use the Patreon money to save up for things like buying more subscriptions to new services and for more microphones. I'm going microphone shopping soon. I'm so proud to be able to offer that service of being a central point for discussion and promoting understanding. Alan loves being a patron. I love you being a patron, Alan. I'm so glad you are. Oh, you're a Patreon too. Thanks to, it's Sheldon. Thank you, Sheldon. Thank you, Phil. You're a Patreon too. Bless all of your dear hearts. And Molly loves it as well. I'm so glad that you do. I didn't finish reading this thing, which also says 7% of very conservative voters say they are intentionally boycotting the runoffs. So, yeah. And Albert Brooks, who, as far as I can understand, is he a comedian? He says, today was a historic day. Donald Trump finally proved there was voter fraud by him. Well, he's endeavoring to commit voter fraud, and conspiring to commit a crime is also part of criminal behavior, is in of itself a crime. You can plan to rob a bank, and that is criminal. You can plan to repeatedly wield your presidential power in an attempt to criminally overturn the results of an election, to subvert the results of an election. That shows that Trump doesn't mind increasing his criminal exposure, so desperate is he to retain immunity from his pre-existing criminal exposure, i.e. he's at that stage of desperation where he's committed so many crimes, he doesn't mind committing more. He's happy to commit more crimes to try and grasp at some more straws, to cling to power and cling to that highly prized get out of jail free card that he has as president of the United States. So we're still watching the dynamics in the Middle East and whether or not Trump will wage war against Iran, not because we're so concerned that Iran is innocent, but certainly the people of Iran don't deserve to have a war unleashed on them in order to help Trump believe he's bolstering his political fortunes in his last official 18 days in office. The Wall Street Journal, which I don't have a subscription to, and I'm unlikely to get one because it's a Murdoch publication, meaning it's typically spreading disinformation, but occasionally offers real reporting. But the Wall Street Journal says in its editorial board opinion section that Republicans, by asserting congressional authority to second-guess state electoral slates, are giving Democrats more ammunition to overturn the Electoral College in favor of a direct popular vote. So that is pretty groundbreaking. That's the Wall Street Journal arguing that Trump's criminal behavior now and the behavior of Republicans in supporting Trump by saying, yes, look, we haven't succeeded in the court system to challenge the votes. There's been no adequate evidence, any evidence of fraud other than 3 cases of people trying to pretend to be their dead parents and vote a second time for Trump. Those Republicans are strengthening the national case for moving on from the archaic and racist Electoral College system of determining a president and moving towards a popular vote, a direct popular vote. And look, the appeal of a direct popular vote might not always have been evident to everybody, but more and more people are coming to understand that you need that kind of collective intelligence that is a worthwhile gamble. And that's all democracy is. Democracy is never a guarantee of a benign leader. It is always a gamble that enough people will be able to see through a charlatan, con artist, criminal to safeguard the nation. Because bad leadership, bad faith activity from the top can poison the outcome for so many, not just in terms of unfairly having your team lose with a rigged umpire, but hundreds of thousands of people unnecessarily dying and millions of people unnecessarily losing their jobs because the economy and public health are not separate entities. They are inextricably linked. And Trump, by prolonging the pandemic for Americans, has prolonged, extended, and amplified economic pain for Americans. So, as well as reducing the amount of unemployment insurance payments from the federal government by 1 week down from 11 to 10, merely because he delayed signing that omnibus COVID relief bill that was passed by the Senate. He did eventually sign it. Thank you. Only after watching, I presume, the public outcry at having unemployment insurance payments denied to so many, and people being mad. When the madness, when the anger and resentment at Trump is spread broadly enough across the neutral middle of the American population that doesn't much care for politics or doesn't care enough to have identified a political party that they like to be associated with. If you outrage the neutral middle, then Trump knows, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want to make an enemy of the bell curve middle of the American public. He gains advantage from irritating and upsetting the left. That actually works to cheer up and motivate his base on the right and the far right. They love upsetting the left. They drink liberal tears with relish, and it's a principal factor in the feedback loop of emotional reward they derive from the transgressive politics of Trump, and they're feeling that they are fighting for the restoration of manly men, womanly women, for a restoration of the status and privilege they might feel that they've lost as men, or the status and privilege they might feel they've lost as white Christians, who are now often looked at askance, particularly with their embrace of Trump. Yes, poor diddums. Now they're often called fascists and hypocrites. And before that, they had to be concerned that society was increasingly embracing inclusiveness with relation to sexual preference, gender expression, sex expression. All of those things were becoming more fluid, and that makes some people feel destabilized and concerned. Some people, like the Westboro Baptist Church people, are more obviously unhinged about it, but there's a substantial number of people in the middle who make the mistake of conflating Christian with good. And when we are able to recognize that that's a critical mistake, do not associate Christianity with any type of automatic virtue or vice. Just be prepared to take people individually and say, it's up to your personal moral choices. You don't get brownie points for having right religious beliefs. All people are speculating that Trump will go to Scotland. Was there an Iranian death threat for Trump? I missed that. Oh my gosh. The Groovy Kids watch. That's lovely. The world will be so much better off if Republicans disdain voting in the Georgian runoff, because with Democratic control of the Senate, it will be much easier to have meaningful action on climate change. America will be able to be a leader in regards to renewable energy, cultivating that science and cultivating that industry and subsidizing that industry, as opposed to the billions of dollars that are spent currently, taxpayer dollars, that are spent currently subsidizing fossil fuel industries. Should Congress write rules to formalize the honor system in the future that we all presumed was protecting us? And when you get a dishonorable president, turns out those things are not codified. But even when Trump broke laws, it was hard to promote prosecution of the law because Trump appointed an attorney general who was in cahoots with him. Yes, Scotland would prosecute Trump, so he wouldn't go there. The Saudi Arabians might take him, yes. Alan's putting up my Patreon link again. Thank you, Alan. Oh no, your brother can't get disability payments because he can't sign the paperwork while he's in hospital. That's very unfortunate. Oh good, Craig agrees as a Christian. Yes, various new laws were created after Nixon, including the creation of multiple roles of inspector generals who got to oversee various departments. And Trump fired multiple inspector generals and replaced them with cronies. So he found workarounds, but at the same time, a lot of laws and a lot of norms and safeguards and pride in democracy has helped people at different levels of government resist some of Trump's worst impulses and has protected America a bit. Although some of the people who went to work for Trump and said we deluded ourselves that we would be the adults in the room, we probably just prolonged his stay in office because in our effort to make things more normal, we made Trump appear more normal and we hid his true deviancy and the nature of the geopolitical threat to the world and to the United States that is Donald J. Trump. We hid that. We drew a smokescreen over it. I love Molly and Alan trying to help bring more people on board the Dav Chat Patreon train. Thank you. You do need me rested. Thank you, Bob. I will go to bed. I'm so glad you said that. Take care, everybody. And I hope to talk to you again soon. Take care of yourselves and each other. Remember, we can identify with the best among us, and we never have to despair because of the actions of the worst. They do not taint us. We make our own moral choices each day. You'll have to tell me about it when I next see you, Sheldon. Take care. Thank you, Cool Photo. Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Sheldon, Hoskins, Molly, Alan. Bye-bye, everybody. Good night.